There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn, Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and my video to record my most anticipated releases for the summer of 2025, which I think it's weird that the summer, if you divide the year into 4 quarters, the summer is July, August, September. September does not feel like summer, but doesn't matter. Here I am, 3 months worth of upcoming new releases that intrigue me. So let's get started. I've got them grouped by month, but beyond that I haven't got them sorted by pub date. Pub dates are very often geographically specific and different. Editing Shawn here. Well, here I am right at the get-go. Just apologizing. No, not apologizing, but explaining some of the strange things that are going to happen later in the video. There were a handful, 2, maybe 3 books that I hadn't done enough of a preview, enough research when I made my list of books, and then did further research and looking at more about what the plot was about or what other reviews said, and decided that ultimately they weren't Shawn books, and I just kept the camera rolling, and I've decided to leave all that in so that you can laugh at what a fly by the seat of the pants kind of booktuber I am, and possibly those books will still be of interest to you, even though I ultimately decided that they wouldn't be for me. There's been a few times while recording book hauls that I have pre-bailed on books that I had purchased and had in my hand because I read the first paragraph or something and said, oh no, that I'll never read that. So this is kind of similar, but on the other side of things. So please bear with me. The first one I have in July is A Thread of Light by Neema Shah, coming out from Picador. I believe that's in the UK. Set in 1941 London, Blitz bombings, and centers on a group of Londoners who are, presumably most are of Indian origin, working tirelessly to free India from British rule. It's a love story to boot. Oh, and of course, the reason this caught my eye is because I read Neema Shah's, I believe it was her debut, Cololo Hill, which I loved, about Ugandan Asians. It was a wonderful novel, so I'm expecting and hoping that this one will be too. Next is a queer book from Africa, Necessary Fiction by Eloghosa Osunde from Riverhead Books, and it's about cross-generational queer life in Nigeria, primarily set in Lagos. I think it's now safe to say that Nigeria is the literary center of the world, and so this one has caught my eye. That cover is lovely. I have not read Eloghosa Osunde's Vagabonds, but have heard nothing but good things about it. Next, another queer title, Pan by Michael Clune, Penguin Books publication. That cover is enigmatic. I haven't quite decided if I love it, but it's certainly intriguing. Am I now ready to deal with my allergy to Greek myths in fiction? This one, the queer 15-year-old protagonist feels like the Greek god Pan is trapped inside his body. I think that probably the only way I'm going to read it is if a bunch of you who have a similar allergy, and there aren't many of you out there, say, oh, but this one's different, Shawn, you should read it. That one's a questionable one on my list, but interesting nonetheless. Next is one called Simplicity by Mattie Lubchansky. This is a graphic novel. And again, this one is a little bit outside my comfort zone. I have not read the previous graphic novel by Mattie Lubchansky, but it was a horror one called Boys Weekend. This one is about a timid academic sent out into the walled dystopian security territory of New York City to invest a cult in the wilds of the Catskill Mountains. Not quite sure how that ended up on my most anticipated list, but there it is. If you have any comments about anything to do with this, please weigh in. Oh, and also it's got queer stuff happening in it, so maybe that's why it ended up on this list. I don't know. The next one, I'm much more sure about. Endling by Maria Reva, coming out from Virago. And, came out, it's actually already out in the US from Doubleday, but it's coming out in the UK. Set in Ukraine 2022, so this one with a maverick biologist. I don't need to know anything else about it. It sounds amazing. It's got a really impressive average rating out of 242 ratings. It's got a 4.15 average. And Maria Reva is a Canadian, born in Ukraine, grew up in Canada. I think she's now in Texas. Oh, and the protagonist, Eva, this maverick biologist, she funds her biological research by dating Western men, taking them on guided romance tours. It sounds fun, it sounds important. And the reviews so far are good, based on the US publication. Here's another one from Virago, coming out in July. I Will Live by, I believe, a Dutch writer, Lale. Doesn't have a very high rating, but translated, I believe, from the Turkish, but I'm not sure. It could be translated from the Dutch. Editing Shawn here. I realized that I didn't get to the bottom of who the translator was or what language it was translated from. I have now gone to a crazy amount of work to find out the translator's name, and this is insane because this was longlisted for a translation prize, but the Goodreads entry doesn't have the translator's name. None of the Amazon.com or .ca or whatever entries have the translator's name. It's insane. It's shameful. It was translated from the Dutch by Kristen Gehrman. For God's sakes, people, do better. The author, Lale, is a Turkish-Dutch writer, and this is about a young Turkish-Dutch woman rebelling against her strict religious upbringing. This one has a fairly low rating, I just noticed now, so I would want to read or hear some reviews from people whose reading tastes I share before committing to acquiring a copy, but it does sound interesting. So those are the ones I have for July. Let's move on to August, which is the slowest month in publishing, but I did manage to find quite a few. The first is What We Left Unsaid by Winnie Emmelie, a road trip with 3 Chinese-American siblings, a sister and 2 brothers. They had been on this same road trip along Route 66 years and years ago, and something bad happened, and they didn't go. But now their mother is having a serious operation, so they make this road trip anew to see her. But they have been estranged since they aborted the same road trip 30 years before. Sounds like it could be very interesting. And that's coming out from Atria/Emmelie Bestler Books. I don't know what that means. I assume it's an imprint from a publisher, but I don't know. Now here is one that I was happy to see that this writer has a new book, because I did enjoy another book by her, Fonseca, by Jessica Frances Kane. I read The Rules for Visiting, and I reviewed it. I remember I reviewed it in a noisy Tokyo park. Rules for Visiting was about friendship, about a woman who is more comfortable around plants than people. But it's really about friendship, and I love novels that center on friendship, and that was a particularly lovely one. And this new one is about Penelope Fitzgerald. Yeah. Penelope Fitzgerald traveled to Mexico with her son in search of an inheritance. I don't know why it was in search of rather than just a claim, but the details would be in the book. And so this novel is set in 1952, and Penelope Fitzgerald and her family are characters. So that can work, but that is something that can certainly go off the rails, I think, more often than not. That kind of factual premise for a novel, but I was impressed enough by Rules for Visiting that I definitely want to give this a try. And I read only one by Penelope Fitzgerald, which I liked. I can't think of the title, and so I'm vaguely interested in her. This comes out from Penguin. I just found out about this one. I thought I had my list all finalized, and I did one last check. And this sounds right up my street. Also coming out in August, When the Cranes Fly South by Lisa Ridzén, translated from the Swedish by Alice Menzies. It's a debut about an elderly man trying to reconcile with his son before it's too late. And it's about love, friendship, fatherhood, and dogs. Again, that could be schmaltzy, overly sentimental, but I see one of the blurbs, and blurbs are silly propaganda, but one by Garth Stein of the New York Times said, it's sneakily emotional. So if that's true, that's the kind of emotional story that works for me. Lisa Ridzén this makes me nervous. She's a sociologist. Have you ever read a really amazing work of literary fiction by a sociologist? May she be the first one. Next, September. Lots of interesting sounding stuff. Coming out in September, I will start with one that I fully expect to love, love, love. And that is Sharon Butala's new memoir, How to Breathe Water. Heidi of My Reading Life and I will be buddy reading an advanced copy of this so we can both talk about it on our channels, and I will be interviewing Sharon about it in time for the pub date, which I believe is September 1st, although I think it's a bit iffy, sometime in September. And the premise of this is fascinating, and she talked about it. I have another episode of Sharon and Shawn Talk Books that will be coming soon, but this will go up first, where she talks about it at some length. And the premise of it is, immediately after COVID, Sharon goes on a road trip with a friend, and they drive from Calgary to Winnipeg, stopping along at places where Sharon had lived, pretty exclusively, I think, at places Sharon had lived, and that's the structure of the memoir. And that's all I need to know about it. How to Breathe Water. She said you have to read the book to find out what that means. If you don't know, Sharon Butala is a friend of mine. I befriended her after first interviewing her for my channel, and especially now that she's moved from Calgary to Saskatoon, I socialize with her. My mom and I socialize with her on a fairly regular basis, so I won't be able to be objective about it, and I can't wait to read it. This is another case of I didn't read the first book yet by this author, but I'm still interested in the fact that she has a second one coming out. Nina Dunic. Her second published work is called Suddenly Light, and this is a short story collection. And her novel, The Clarion, I started and I was enjoying it, but it was one of those that didn't make the cut when I had to whittle down my current reads to a manageable 15, and I haven't gotten much above 15, but it didn't make that cut, and I want to get back to it, and the short stories sound intriguing. Oh, and just like her novel, her prose is compared to Mavis Gallant and Alice Munro. Here's one coming out from Archipelago Books, Cécé by Emmelie, Prophète, translated from the French by Aidan Rooney. This is a Haitian novel. The titular protagonist lives in a gang-ridden neighborhood on the outskirts of Port-au-Prince. She has witnessed the death of her mother and grandfather, takes care of her bedridden Uncle Frito, and that is going to be a tough read, but I think I'm up for it. Emmelie, Prophète, was born in Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince? How do you say that? Right, I have just learned that the correct French pronunciation is Port-au-Prince, and that in English you're not supposed to pronounce the T on the end of port either, but anytime I hear it in the news, it is. So Port-au-Prince, or Port-au-Prince, is where the author is from and where the story is set. The next one is called Runs in the Blood by Matthew J. Trafford. This is coming out from Arsenal Pulp Press in September, and this is a queer story collection. I don't know anything about Matthew Trafford, but he has an MFA in creative writing from UBC, and he has a previous collection of stories called The Divinity Gene. He lives in Toronto. That is definitely one that piques my interest. And here is one from Sinoist Books, the UK publisher that publishes translated Chinese literature, Tibetan Sky by Ning Ken. Alright, editing Shawn here. I messed up part of this, so let me redo it. This novel is by a Chinese writer, a Beijing writer, about a Beijing guy who gets burnt out in Beijing and moves to Lhasa in Tibet. It was translated from the Mandarin Chinese by Thomas Moran. This is a philosophical novel, which doesn't necessarily sound like a fit for Shawn Bree's books, but anything about Tibet, I know little about it, and it's one of the more important places in the world. I think we should stop talking about China so much and talk about the oppressed nation of Tibet that has been subsumed into China. The protagonist is in Beijing. He's a disillusioned Beijing academic finds meaning in Lhasa with a Tibetan woman, and the two, Uki and Wang, they are on either side of a fierce philosophical debate, and then Wang's masochistic fantasies resurface. I think I'm probably not going to bother with this one, but I've told you about it. Do you want to read it? I think I've talked myself out of that one. Now here is one that I'm definitely excited by. coming out from Freehand Books in September. That's the same publisher that's bringing out Sharon Butala's memoir in the same month. We Are All of Us Left Behind by Bradley Summer. And he's a Canadian writer. Oh, he was born in Sydney, Australia, moved to Canada in the 80s. And I believe he lives in Alberta. He certainly did at one time. I'll get more information about him later, but I can't believe he's had at least 3 other books previously, and I've never heard of him. This is a novel, a queer coming-of-age story about a young man's journey from Canada to Serbia. That's all I need to know about it. Next is a woman's novel in translation, publishing in September, just after Women in Translation Month, from Sandorf Passage. So I do actually have an advanced PDF copy. It's called Bedbugs by Martina Vidaic, translated from the Croatian by Elias-Bursać. The protagonist is holed up in her apartment in Zagreb, dealing with the sudden death of her husband, who she had married only days earlier, and she's an architect, and that's all I want to know. And unlike a lot of modern Croatian fiction, this one is not centered on the war, but the human condition, the isolating, intrinsic difficulties of the human condition. Here is one coming out from Goose Lane Editions, another of my favorite independent presses in Atlantic Canada, and this is Bad Indians Book Club, Reading at the Edge of 1,000 Worlds by Paddy Krawick. And this is not a novel. This text is at the borders of history, science, memoir, and fiction, and explores this question: what worlds do books written by marginalized people describe and invite us to inhabit? Paddy Krawick is an Anishinaabe writer, and she lives in Niagara Falls. She's a podcaster, co-host of the podcast Medicine for the Resistance. I need to know a lot more about her earlier book, Becoming Kin, an Indigenous call to unforgetting the past and reimagining our future. Also sounds fabulous. All right, that's what I got. Which of these would you be the most likely to pick up first? You want to read them all. Thanks for watching.